Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. The Looney Tunes movie Rabbit's Run is not good. This movie went straight to video in 2015, and you would be forgiven if you forgot about it because nobody cares about this thing. It came and went without leaving any wabbit twacks, and even die-hard Looney Tunes fans don't usually bring it up in conversation. You want to know the really frustrating thing, though? The lack of quality is not from a lack of trying. I genuinely believe that the people who made this movie wanted to make the best possible Looney Tunes experience they could. The problem is they just fumbled the ball. Okay, I'll start by giving credit where it's due and acknowledge some positives, mild as they might be. First of all, they took a big risk by making Lola the protagonist. Yeah, as crazy as it sounds, Lola Bunny, the newest Looney Tune who's managed to stick around, is the star, as opposed to Bugs, Daffy, or Porky. She's the one who sets the plot in motion and keeps it moving, and she's the one with a clearly defined goal. Given the way everything is set up, it does kind of work in a weird way, especially since they maintain her scatterbrained depiction from the Looney Tunes show as opposed to her bland athletic girl boss persona from Space Jam. It's not enough to save the movie, but it's not a bad choice either. The movie also incorporates a lot, and I mean a lot, of characters and references that tell me the people involved have an extensive knowledge about the Looney Tunes, a detail that will be important later in this video. With all of that said, though, I just can't call Rabbit's Run a good movie, and I think I've narrowed down the reasons why. There are a lot of things I could pick apart, mind you. For example, very early in the movie, Lola gets her own little parody of a Disney Princess I Want song entitled There's a Smell in My Mind. You must be joking. Nope, I'm completely serious. It's about her wanting to invent a new scent of perfume. Alright, so there is context, but that title is still cringy. No argument there, and the song itself isn't much better. Like any I Want song, it lays out Lola's big goal for the movie, but unlike other examples, it's not very good. The only thing that works about it is the revelation at the end that she trashed the store she was in while singing, which leads to her being fired. The song's existence sets up the expectation that it will be a musical, yet the majority of the runtime goes by with no music beyond the underscore. Then as Act 3 begins, at the precise moment when everyone has forgotten the first song even happened, another song breaks out, sung by Mac and Tosh of all people, while they give Lola a makeover. Look, I enjoy musicals, but you have to commit to the idea, and only having two randomly placed songs, one of which adds nothing to the plot, is not a commitment. I could also speak at length about some baffling creative choices. For example, the way Daffy is written seems like it's harkening back to his earliest incarnation, where he was a random high-energy screwball that hopped around and defied physics on a whim to the annoyance of everyone around him. Yet in this movie, for some reason, Daffy is animated and performed as the low-energy, sardonic iteration from the Looney Tunes show, which leads to a glaring disparity that I simply cannot ignore. This portrayal demands that Daffy be as zany as possible, but instead he looks and sounds bored and lethargic, and I will never understand how that mix-up occurred. Then you have the overuse of cameos. Like most modern Looney Tunes projects, Rabbit's Run tries to cram as many characters into it as possible, even though it didn't really need to. The primary characters are as follows. Lola Bunny is the main protagonist, having the MacGuffin everyone is after, in this case an invisibility formula she invented by accident. Bugs Bunny is the co-lead as someone who gets roped into the adventure against his will. Elmer Fudd is a government agent tracking the rabbits down, while Cecil is another government agent whose true loyalties are to Marvin the Martian, who comes in as a third-act twist villain. Then, rather surprisingly, Giovanni Jones is prominently featured as Lola's boss who wants to take credit for her work, while Yosemite Sam is a two-bit crook who wants the invisibility formula to become the world's greatest criminal. That's the extent of the primary cast, and the movie probably could have been told with just them. Instead, though, a bunch of other characters are thrown in, usually for no reason. Daffy at first seems like he'll be tagging along with the rabbits once he's introduced, and he contributes quite a bit while he's there, but he just casually steps out at the halfway point without any fanfare. As for everyone else, they're reduced to cameos that don't really add much. Some, like Pepe Le Pew and Foghorn Leghorn, are indirectly linked to the setting, but their minor roles could be played by anyone. Speedy Gonzales is little more than a plot device who delivers a MacGuffin ingredient to Lola before disappearing. Porky is literally just thrown into one scene purely for the sake of having him. See what I mean? There was no reason to have all these characters present. Look, I'm not opposed to all-star projects, especially with characters like this, but the characters actually need a reason to be there. In The Scarlet Pumpernickel, for example, the cast contains a bunch of cameos as part of the joke. This is Daffy's vision of a swashbuckling epic where everyone else is just there to make him look good. You can't tell this story without cutting them.
What about Back in Action? Isn't that just a cameo fest too?
Well, kind of, but even there the cameo characters still at least provide a laugh. Consider how Back in Action features a cameo from Scooby-Doo and Shaggy chewing out Matthew Lillard for his performance in the live-action Scooby-Doo movies. It doesn't really add anything to the plot, but it is a funny meta-joke, and it's preceded by another meta-joke about Porky and Speedy lamenting how PC culture has affected their jobs. Now look at Porky's aforementioned cameo in Rabbit's Run. He's at a stoplight that turns green. Bugs and Lola stop to argue right in front of him, thus impeding his progress. He gets upset only for the bunnies to shut him down with a glare, and when they finally move out of the way, the light is red again and he's still stopped. Okay, so what's the joke? That Porky was mildly inconvenienced? Keep in mind, I've told you everything that happens in that scene. Porky is just mildly annoyed that he's still stuck at a red light. Are there other cars behind him with angry drivers who will blame him for not moving and exact revenge? Is he on his way to a date with Petunia or a job interview that he can't be late for? Is there any reason given why it's important for Porky to get past this red light? The answer to all of those questions is no. There are no stakes, so there is no joke. It serves no purpose, so that cameo, like most of the others, is ultimately unnecessary. The thing is that there's a deeper issue in Rabbit's Run that doomed it from the very start. Lest I be accused of front-loading this video more than I already have, though, allow me to give you a few examples of what happens in the movie before I state the outcome. Towards the end of Act 2, Bugs, Lola, and Giovanni Jones are all aboard a plane heading for Paris. Giovanni has a seat, but the bunnies need to disguise themselves, so they don some uniforms. Only Lola puts on a male uniform, and Bugs puts on a female uniform. Now, any Looney Tunes fan can tell you that Bugs is no stranger to cross-dressing, but why does he do it? Well, it's part of his usual penchant for disguise, which he implements frequently to outwit his foes, but his disguises are designed to exploit his enemies' weaknesses. When Bugs dresses in drag specifically, he's exploiting the weakness of libido. He knows that Elmer Fudd is so stupid that he'll be distracted by the illusion of curves in the right places, and he'll respond instantly to what he thinks is a pretty woman showing interest in his bald, dopey self. That overrides his common sense every single time. Contrary to what the identitarians have insisted over the years, that's the only reason. It's a trick meant to exploit stupidity, nothing more. So getting back to Rabbit's Run, why does Bugs dress in drag there? Is it to fool Giovanni? Well, given that this version of Giovanni doesn't seem like he'd be interested in women, that clearly doesn't apply. Was it a simple mix-up that they have to run with? No, because Lola points out that Bugs can and probably should change. So what's the reason? Bugs likes the way his legs look in heels. That's it. That's why they put him in a dress.
Or consider the role of Cecil.
Now, Cecil is infamous as one of the few characters who can defeat Bugs, which he's done several times, so he's positioned as the main antagonist of Rabbit's Run. However, the rivalry between Bugs and Cecil in the classic cartoon stems from the fable about the tortoise and the hare, hence why their encounters are always framed around the idea of racing. Bugs wants to prove it wrong, but he can't. He's bound by the rules of the story. In fact, Bugs is usually framed as the antagonist of these cartoons. Cecil is passive-aggressive, but not openly antagonistic beyond that. In the movie, however, Cecil is reframed as being an out-and-out villain who is more than willing to kill Bugs and Lola in pursuit of his goal. This, of course, is extremely out of character for the turtle.
Or consider this moment from the chase in Marvin the Martian's headquarters.
Here, the characters do a variation of the hallway chase gag, only this time it involves faulty teleporters that end up swapping their body parts around. At one point, this thing walks past. Now, even casual viewers will likely know that this outlandish design is from Duck Amuck, specifically a moment where the animator is messing with Daffy by completely redrawing everything but his face.
It is certainly recognizable, but the question is, why is it here?
You see, Daffy is not part of this chase. As mentioned, he exits the picture about halfway through and doesn't come back until the very end. As it stands, there's no reason for the characters who are present to end up combined in this configuration. And that's before we even get to why this design exists in the first place. The whole point of Duck Amuck is to see how far the animation team can stretch Daffy Duck before he disappears altogether and becomes unrecognizable. The answer to which is pretty far, and this is part of that experiment. In Rabbit's Run, it appears simply because it's a thing that fans will recognize.
Do you see the problem? Like I said before, it feels like the filmmakers have a lot of knowledge about Looney Tunes. The problem is that they don't know how to implement that knowledge.
They know that Bugs will sometimes dress in drag, but they don't know why, so they just put him in a dress and make up their own lame duck excuse. They know that Cecil and Bugs are rivals, but they don't know the reason for that rivalry, so they make Cecil an evil, murderous sociopath. They know that this crazy design is something everyone recognizes, but they don't understand the significance behind it, so they just throw it in at random for the sake of a reference.
But if you think this is all open to interpretation, I give you the piece de resistance that proves the point.
When Lola first meets Bugs, he's working as a cab driver, and when pressed, he shares his backstory. He used to have a quaint little hole in the ground where he lived happily, but it was going to be destroyed by a construction company that wanted to build a skyscraper.
A familiar setup, right? Many a classic cartoon has opened with Bugs' home being threatened and he needs to step up and save it. Only this time, Bugs lost.
He could not save his home, and his defeat has left him melancholic and apathetic. In essence, Bugs Bunny has given up, and his arc in the movie is about getting him back into form.
An interesting choice, but there's just one problem. Bugs Bunny never gives up. Let's again look to the classics for our proof.
At the beginning of Barbary Coast Bunny, Bugs finds an enormous gold nugget, so he's instantly wealthy. Unfortunately, he gets duped when Nasty Canasta sets up a fake bank and scams him out of the gold, leaving him trapped and penniless. 6 months later, Canasta has set up a crooked casino in San Francisco using his ill-gotten goods, and Bugs shows up to deliver some payback. In short, Bugs lost, then spent 6 months tracking Canasta down so he could settle the score.
Bugs Bunny does not give up. He gets revenge. Why else would one of his catchphrases be,
"Of course you realize this means war."
He never throws in the towel, no matter what the odds are. Wrong him and he'll dish it back tenfold. Even if a short ends with him losing, he'll be back next time. Therefore, as mischaracterized as Cecil is in this movie, Bugs got it even worse because the writers had him do something he would never, ever do.
There you have it. Now, in all fairness, Rabbit's Run is not the worst Looney Tunes thing I've ever seen. It's not a soulless commercial like Space Jam: A New Legacy, it's not a botched experiment like Lunatics Unleashed, and it's not completely inappropriate like the Censored 11. All that said, though, there's one other thing it's not, and that is a proper Looney Tunes work. how can it be when it got all the important stuff wrong? As such, it remains forgotten to this very day, serving only as a counterexample of what not to do. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. You know, I will admit I did laugh when they referenced the Yosemite Sam mud flaps in the movie, but again, that was just a reference for its own sake, so it wasn't really enough to win me over.